We're doing this again. We're doing this again. Again, for the fourth time. I think this is the fourth one, right? Like all of the previous tier lists, we have a set of rules that we're going to be following in order to rank all of the biomes as adequately and objectively and rationally as possible, which is not very, but it's still somewhat. For each biome, there's like a few factors that we're going to be considering. The most important factor for biomes, especially in the case of Terraria, is like, how much do you lose if you take the biome out of the game, right? So if this biome was gone, what do we miss out on all of a sudden? So basically relevancy, how much content there is, how good is that content, how interesting is that content, and like identity will be another big one. If a biome just kind of feels like it's just a thing, right, and doesn't really have an identity to it, then that definitely makes a bit of a weaker biome. So like, why should we care about the biome, basically? If I don't care about the biome, it's lower on the list. So yeah, that's the gist of how we're going to be ranking it. They're in, I'm pretty sure, alphabetical order. There will be timestamps in the comments of the YouTube video should you be watching this in the future on YouTube and want to skip around to other biomes. Feel free to do so. Feel free to skip to the end of the video and just look at all the things at the end. If you do that, I'm sad, but I understand. Anyway, we're starting off with the above ground desert biomes. So first of all, we have Desert Purity, just the normal desert biome, no modifications to it, which generally is a little bit of like a mixed bag, right? Because a lot of people choose to, at the very start of the game, rush the desert and snag cactus stuff and get some decent gear that's just like a little bit above the curve without having to really try it all. But at the same time, sandstorms happen in pre-hard mode, which aren't really that interesting and are just kind of an element of frustration. In hard mode, sandstorms then become relevant again, though, because you can get gear from that, and some of the gear is actually pretty interesting, which puts the above ground desert in kind of a weird spot. I will say that the desert does have impact and like has relevancy to your run. Most of the time you're going to spend a decent amount of time in the above ground desert. And I think even despite the kind of like frustrations regarding the desert, it's probably worth putting in B tier. I do think the desert deserves a little bit more, honestly. I think it probably could have a bit more. It has pyramids, which are pretty epic, but pyramids are only barely counted for the surface since they are technically under the sand. I would like to see deserts get like structures or something, right? Like structures that are on the actual physical surface, which is really true of all Terraria biomes, actually. There are very few above ground structures in the world. The other thing to say about the desert, though, Jesus Christ, the desert has some of the most like interesting like visual variations in the game. Like the biome differences during the sandstorm, the freaking sand sharks, and if you haven't seen like the Hallowed or the Crimson or the Corrupt Sand Shark, fix that. Like, go look at them. They're some of the most interesting sprites in vanilla, but they're really, really specific. Next up is Desert Corruption. The differences when you add the corruption to the desert are not that big, honestly. You get the Dark Mummy, which is pretty relevant because you can get the Onyx Blaster. Visually, it looks a lot different, which is kind of nifty. I really like the aesthetic of the like sub-biome sort of thing. So yeah, Desert Corruption really doesn't have much going on. I wish it had more going on because it's visually incredible. I think it's one of like the desert variations are some of the most interesting from like a sort of identity and spriting perspective. But as far as actual content is concerned, the Desert Corruption variant does not have a lot going on. Desert Crimson is basically the exact same thing as the Desert Corruption. Like, they don't really have any meaningful differences between each other. I think I like Crimson more than Corruption, just from a personal perspective. Like, as far as biome identity is concerned, at least in the desert, I kind of like the Crimson one more than the Corruption. But there really isn't that much going on still, and as much as the identity is there, the actual like meat of the biome isn't. There's not a lot that differentiates the two, as far as I'm concerned. The Hollow Desert is just slightly worse because it doesn't have dark mummies, it has light mummies. And light mummies are not as relevant as dark mummies are, at least as far as I understand. Maybe I'm missing something, but light shards are generally not as important as dark shards. Again, really cool identity, really cool visual perspective on this alt biome, but there's not much depth to it, right? So to me, this is just an E tier biome. And this is going to, one of the things that I'm just gonna point out now, this is kind of going to be a trend with this list, in that there's going to be a lot of biomes with alts for like the Crimson, Corruption, and Hallow, where when you really get down into the actual depth of it, there's not much that gets added, right? Usually it's a lot of just like the same enemies from the Purity, Corruption, or the Purity Crimson, right? Like you'll see Ichor stickers in the Crimson Ice biome, but that's not unique to the Crimson Ice, that's just Crimson period. Okay, Desert Underground. It has that stupid worm that like just one-shots you immediately in expert mode. So you cannot go there ever, unless you just want to die immediately. It's a horrible idea. It's super rough. I forget which one it is. It's Tomb Crawlers, right? Are those the pre-hard mode one, or is it Doom Splicer? I don't know. I called it Doom Splicer because like my mind is signaling that I'm going to die immediately. There is a better chance for Extractinators, if I'm not mistaken though, which is kind of nice, especially since if you wanted to be a thrower, which is just ranged now, you could get fossils, and then you could convert those fossils with the Extractinators within the biome, which is a nice kind of cohesive like experience. I do like that it kind of just encourages you to go down that path in that way. The Underground Desert also has basilisks in hard mode, which I know are a kind of big deal for some people. I still get comments on the equipment tier list saying that I totally slept on basilisks, even though they are just way too hard to get. They're rare, okay? I'd rather just get the unicorn. It's easier. And like we mentioned before, the Underground Desert, like the Above Ground Desert, is really good about altering like the visual identity of the biome when you make it hollowed or corrupt or crimson. Like when you take a Clintaminator to the Underground Desert, you feel the change, right? Everything alters a ton. And so I think Underground Desert for me is probably A tier, even despite the really annoying stupid worms that are way too strong for the freaking beginning. It has more impact and it has more identity. There's a lot going on in the Underground Desert. Now the Underground Corrupt Desert, we're going to basically just mimic what happened earlier, because once again, not that much changes in the Underground Corrupt Desert. You might be saying, but Hectic, you can get souls there, and I don't count that as a bonus because you can get souls in any Underground Corrupt biome. So it's not so much a thing of identity for that biome as much as it is just corruption as a whole, right? What does it uniquely do in the desert? Not that much. You can also get the stupid lamp item. I think it's super overrated. I don't get the appeal. It's such a hassle to get, and it's not even that good. But if that's your jam, go ahead and grab the lamp. That's enough for me to put it into C tier. You can also get the Onyx Blaster, I think, down here. I forget if it spawns in the underground, but regardless, there you go. Like it looks great. It's got stuff that's all right. I just wish there was more, right? There's so much potential depth to the Underground Desert. It's this really consistent, like, contained experience, but it feels like there's not enough going on with the alterations. The Underground Crimson Desert is the same thing, but it's crimson. So I like it a little bit more. Epic. Suffers from the same problems. A lot of identity, not a lot of depth. Not much you uniquely get from getting a Crimson Desert. It's just kind of there. There's a few enemies that you look out for, you get them, you leave. That's about it. And then the Underground Hollow Desert can go there. It looks great, looks awesome. I love how the biome looks. It's a super cool experience if you're just trying to take in the environment around you. But again, when you dig into it, there's not too much going on in the Hollow Desert. I would like to see more going on with that biome. Which again, like, I did not realize until I started prepping for this list how little the variants actually matter. Like, in the Purity, they're a pretty big deal, right? There's a lot that goes on in the Purity, and just like as a general thing, but the individual biomes, it really doesn't matter if you change them. Like, it's just about having Crimson or Corruption, period, not where it is most of the time, which is, I can kind of see why it's that way, but I also wish it wasn't. I wish there was more reward for individually seeking out these biomes like this. All right, It's the dungeon. I did a playthrough where the whole world was a dungeon. It sucked. It was really bad. I don't recommend it to anybody. Just kidding, it's S tier. Dungeon, right now, the dungeon is getting a rework in 1.4 to give it a lot more going on. And it's interesting that that's the case, because even with the void of content after certain points of progression in the dungeon, there's still so much that goes on in the dungeon that it's still an S tier biome, right? Like, the dungeon is a big deal for a lot of reasons. You could, if you're lucky, you can jump in right at the start and get a water bolt, right? Just at the start of your game, that'll carry you all the way up to whatever dang boss you decide to throw it away. That's pretty epic. The golden chests in progression, that's pretty epic, right? You get a bunch of gear for a bunch of different classes. A lot of people adore the gear from the dungeon, even if I don't like it. People use Muramasa, right? People do that. I don't do that. I think that's silly, but people do that. Yeah, it has Cobalt Shield. Cobalt Shield is like an essential item for a ton of people. I don't really use Cobalt Shield anymore, but a ton of people really dig the Cobalt Shield. Dungeon has the biome chests for if you go and grind in a certain biome, you can come back and you can get vampire knives, and then you win the game up until Moonlord, where they decide that lifesteal is no longer allowed, right? You can get like the Tabby or the Master Ninja gear or the sniper rifle or the rocket launcher or the shadow beam staff or the specter staff, like whole swath of hard mode gear for like every class, Paladin's hammer, Paladin's shield, all of that stuff. The Dungeon Guardian exists, right? This one piece of Terraria identity that everyone knows about. You don't go in the dungeon until Skeletron's dead. There's like everyone's favorite light pet, Wisp in a Bottle. That's pretty up there. People adore that one. There's water candles, spawn rate boosters that you can only get in the dungeon. The mechanic exists. I don't care about her, but other people do. The alchemy tables in there, the bewitching tables in there. You can get shadow keys, which you can then use to get more gear elsewhere. There's a lot going on in the dungeon. You have a lot of reasons to visit the dungeon, and all of them are unique and interesting, and you can only get there, right? So it's a powerful biome. Dungeon is hard hitting. If you took the dungeon out of Terraria, you have a huge, huge void. There's something truly, truly gone if you took the dungeon out of the game. So it is a hard, hard contender for S tier. I don't even know why I say contender. It just is S tier. It's up there, and it's staying there. I'm not moving it at all, except for I'm putting it F tier for hurting my feelings. Anyway, Granite biome. I don't really know how to feel about the Granite biome placement, frankly. I'm not a builder, so the whole building aspect doesn't impact me very much. Sometimes it can have good loot. Sometimes you can get the night vision helmet. But it has the stupid elemental, which just is like, these walls are cool, but what if I just murdered you? Anyway, like, I don't know. I don't think these walls are necessary. Walls are a suggestion as a whole, frankly. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in D tier since I am ignorant to the building meta, and it is nice to have sub-biomes that provide you with new opportunities for blocks. But honestly, if there's one thing that I can say that I dislike about Granite biomes, above all else, and just beyond all the obvious things to say about the Granite biome, it just doesn't feel like it needs to be in the game. It just doesn't feel special. This is also going to be true of marble biomes. There's so little things like the Granite biome that kind of get plastered into the underground that they kind of almost feel disjointed from the rest of the game. Granite feels like it's kind of just like tacked onto the wall, and it's just like, that's there. You could go there. It doesn't feel very cohesively implemented. Should I make it E tier? I feel like I should make it E tier. I feel like D tier is too kind to Granite biome. I'm making it E tier. It's too late. I did it. I can't take it back now. It's the law. This is gonna be a bit of a spicy take, but beehives are very good. Very good. I really like beehives. One thing that I told myself when I was doing this list is that I am not going to consider bosses, because I think bosses are not a fair, like, bosses just will buff a bunch of biomes and then other biomes just get nerfed for no reason, right? Desert gets destroyed if we consider bosses. So this is irrelevant of Queen Bee real fast, okay? I really like beehives because beehives are a great example of like quality over quantity. beehives pack a lot into a small space, and I would love to see more of this in Terraria. Terraria has this issue, right? Where it's things are either really small or really big. Granite biomes are large, marble biomes are large. They try to shove a lot of things into a small space to the point that it feels a bit disjointed. And then you have things like the jungle shrines, or like the underground houses where it's like, oh, I found it and I got a thing, right? And there's very rarely a middle ground for that in Terraria. I think the beehives are a great example of why that middle ground should exist more often. Because beehives, totally optional, but when you find one and you decide to go and check in on one, they pack a lot of stuff into a reasonably sized space. Hive blocks can give you honey. They spawn bees. The queen bee is in there. I'm not going to count that for this ranking, but the queen bee is in there. And it doesn't need to have a huge scale to be interesting and actually relevant to where it is. Like, there's beehives around the jungle, and then you find this one really big one, and you're like, oh my god, what's going on here, right? It's got a lot of identity. It's got like it's a great access for a unique resource. Honey is used in like lots of arenas and junk like that. I think beehives are like what granite and marble should be, but aren't currently, because they're kind of just everywhere and they're really big and they don't have that much going on, right? Beehives are not as in your face, and I think they're just the better approach to having incidental sort of structures in Terraria. I would love to see more stuff in the sort of scale and quality of beehives. Yeah, I'm reading through my notes about this and I'm remembering the ice biome. Ice biome makes me sad because I really like the identity of ice biome. I like what it has to offer. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can find in the ice biome, but the experience that you have in the ice biome is abysmal. I actively avoid going into ice biomes because of just what it's like to be in an ice biome. The majority of the unique enemies to this biome have the ability to chill you and freeze you on rare occasions, which is not very meaningful, but is extremely frustrating. It basically boils down to the fact that it's the purity biome, but if you get hit once, you might just die, right? That might just be it for you. This is also true of the water. Did you dip your pinky toe into a half cup of water that was hard to see in a little bit of darkness? I apologize. You have officially contracted terminal hypothermia and will not be able to move for the next 55 days. There's so much frustration packed into the ice biome, and a lot of it is exclusive to expert mode, I will say. I'm going to typically count expert mode exclusives as just how the biome operates, because I want to build upon the most depth of the biome, and even if that's bad depth, it's there, right? There are some upsides to the ice biome. They do have a unique biome key, which gives you a not very good drop, but it is a thing that you can do. There's frostburn arrows are pretty huge for early game. They're one of the best ammo types that you can get. There's ice mimics, which have some interesting drops that are pretty nice. There's like frozen turtle shell. Like, ice biome has a lot of stuff in it, but ice biome also just yells at you for being in it. Why are you here? Go away. You're cold. You're frozen. Get out of this biome. Stop being here, right? I think there's an argument for the fact that the ice biome does what it does. I just think it does it too much and too harshly. Do something that's more like engaging, because getting hit and slowing down isn't engaging. It just happens to you, right? But having something spawn from the ceiling that you have to dodge, that's something that you can actually like play around to some capacity. It's like the water thing, but less obnoxious, really. Now we move on to the corrupt ice biome, which just doesn't really have anything going on. As far as I could tell, the only unique thing about the corrupt ice biome from other corrupt biomes is pigrons. Why is this essential biome so devoid of unique alt content? It's odd to me. Why? Like, the ice biome is pretty big deal. You're always gonna encounter it, so why is it so skimpy on the alternate content? Crimson is the same thing. It has pigrons and bacon, but it's Crimson, so I like it a little bit better. Personally, I think Crimson has a nicer identity and stuff like that. You know what Hallow has? Pigrons and bacon. That's it. That's all it's got. Thank you, ice alternate biomes. You have a huge opportunity with the alternate biome system in the game, but it's not really being capitalized upon right now, and that's unfortunate. Also, yeah, you guys are right. Sorry, Granite biome. Okay, so the above ground jungle, not the underground jungle, specifically not the underground jungle, has some stuff going on, but not particularly much. It's nice to put your witch doctor in the above ground jungle, which is pretty cool. It's nice to get like the Uzi. That's something. I never get it personally, but a lot of people love the Uzi. You could farm the jungle key if you wanted to in hard mode. And everything constantly hurts there. Everything is always scary in the above ground jungle. It's a really rough time. And on top of that, and it frustrates me to no end, there is no valid alt to the above ground jungle. This huge biome in the game doesn't have a valid alternate for Corruption, Crimson, or Hallow, meaning that if any of them spawn in your jungle, either your jungle dies or the alt itself dies. And that's a huge problem. Given all that information, I think I'm gonna put the jungle biome just a little bit higher than the ice biome, but I feel similarly frustrated with the two of them, in that the jungle, as it stands currently in the above ground, doesn't have much going on and has a lot of frustration factor to it. There's certainly things that are important and cool and significant to get there, and it does have plenty of identity, but there's just some really big chunks missing from this biome's sort of scale as a whole. And I really hope that they come into existence in the near future. That's true, it does have the bait, which is nice, but I don't want to move it any higher. Above ground jungle is great for farming bait, for fishing, which is pretty epic. Now the underground jungle. The underground jungle is a beast of its own. If you decide that you are not afraid of the spooky terrors of the jungle, you can jump into the underground jungle and get tons of goodies. You can get the stupid mage armor, you can get the vine hook or whatever it's called, you can make the Amazon, you could make the blade of grass. You can do so much stuff right off the bat in early game if you're not afraid of the jungle. So feel free to just jump in and get a bunch of goodies. There's the boomstick, there's the fiberglass fishing rod, there's the staff of regrowth, there's mana flower spawns here, life fruits spawn here. There's so much going on. And I also think that the jungle really capitalizes super well on having like identity and substructures that other biomes don't really have. The big mahogany trees are fun and interesting. The way that they generate and kind of mess with the cave structure a bit is fun. The shrines themselves are satisfying to locate and are a nice balance of like you have to search for them or just stumble upon them. I already mentioned that I really like the hives. I think they're a great example of how sub-biomes should be done. There's chlorophyte, yeah. There's the jungle definitely changes pretty significantly over the course of a playthrough. I find myself jumping into the jungle a bunch of times during my playthroughs usually because there's just a good reason to go to the jungle. But it also doesn't have an alt still, even in the underground, and that's a pretty notable detriment to the biome. So I am going to put underground jungle in S tier. It's a huge biome, it's super relevant, but it's not above the dungeon because it has that just dramatic detriment to it in that you can't have the other alts. You can turn it into a glowing mushroom biome, but that's a new biome. That's not a jungle alt anymore. Oh, and also, I completely forgot to bring up Plantera bulbs, and now that I'm bringing it up, you're probably expecting me to talk about how bad it is and how awful it is that Plantera bulbs exist. But I actually love Plantera bulbs. I actually really conceptually adore Plantera bulbs. The problem is that they don't spawn. Like, they don't spawn nearly enough, and they don't really give you a great way to find them. You kind of have to just check your mini-map, right? So yeah, I really like that Plantera has this unique spawn method that's relevant to the place that it's in and kind of makes a certain kind of sense, right? When you hold an eyeball in the air and this bigger eyeball comes and tries to kill you, that's adorable, but I have no idea what's going on. When I smash the pretty flower in the jungle and then the pretty flower's mom comes to try and kill me, that makes a bit of sense to me. And I think it's way funnier. Okay. Marble biomes. I think it's like way nicer for building as far as I understand, which makes me want to put it here just for that reason. But I think I'm actually just gonna put it here. I just really don't like the marble biome. I just really don't. There's like, it used to be that like they had the Medusas and the hoplites, but now it's basically just hoplites until you get to hard mode, and then there's Medusas, and it's like super annoying. Whenever I see a marble biome, I don't like, I usually just jump in to see if there's anything relevant and then immediately jump out, right? It's certainly a biome that's nice for building. I see people use marble stuff quite a bit, so it gets to be top of E tier, but marble just sucks, man. It's just this strip of land that you walk through and then never look back, ever, okay? It's rough. It shouldn't even be a biome. It really should. It shouldn't be a quote-unquote biome. Meteor biomes are just... I scratch my head at what the meteor biome is. There is an argument for the fact that it has you can get the space gun combo, right? Because, you know, that means that a lot of people will be going to this and they get a lot of value out of it. But I would like to bring up the counterpoint that by having the space gun meteor armor combo, you are officially making all of this other content gone. Doesn't matter anymore. None of this, get rid of all of these, because a meteor is all you need. The space gun meteor combo, as much as I abused it when I was playing this game casually, is such an issue. It's so bad. It boils down your pre-hard mode playthrough to get bomb, break orb, break bigger orb on fire, shoot gun. Like, that's pretty much a mage pre-hard mode playthrough if you really don't care that much. That should not be how biomes work, right? There shouldn't be one biome that you just get rid of and then suddenly you're God. Additionally, if it is going to be a biome, maybe it should have more than just one enemy that slowly floats towards you and is only a problem if you're standing in the wrong spot. Maybe that enemy should not drop one meteorite ore at a 2% drop rate exclusively in pre-hard mode. I don't... do any of you know that this mechanic exists? I know people who watch my stream know this mechanic exists because it drives me up the wall. It makes no sense. You have the opportunity, if you are not currently the possessor of enough meteorite, which you never will be for the record, unless you're playing with like 4 friends who are all mage. The meteorite is always enough for what you need. So let's get that out of the way first. You don't need more meteorite. But if you, for some godforsaken reason, did need more meteorite because you accidentally threw it in the trash can with your little shift-click frenzy, you could sit there, and for every 50 meteor heads you killed on average, you would get 1 meteorite. 1. Not bar, ore. 1 meteorite ore block per 50 meteorite heads. And only in pre-hard mode. If you're in hard mode, you can't do it anymore. Why? What happened? Who did this? Was somebody having a really bad day at Relogic and was just like, wouldn't it be funny if I just made this a thing and then waited for people to notice? Like, is it a joke? Is it a meme? Like, why isn't it? If I had an F- tier, it would go there, because what is going on there? Why is it? And even disregarding it, meteorite should not be a biome. Just end of story. Shouldn't count as a biome, but it does. And if it does count as a biome, it really should have a bit more going on than just a head that floats at you and will give you a meteorite if it's a sunny Tuesday with a frog leaping through the air. So next up is the surface mushroom biome. It exists. You can get the NPC. You can farm the glowing mushrooms. And that's pretty cool. They really should add more to the surface mushroom biome, since it's a thing you have to go out of your way to get. They really definitely should put more into it, because I would love to see like a really unique situation. Like, what if you could only fight a mini boss under the surface mushroom biome? That'd be really cool. I'd like that a lot. Right now it's just kind of a thing though. Underground mushroom biome is actually quite cute. I enjoy what the underground mushroom biome is like as an experience. In that you have to like, it's kind of crammed full of traps usually, which is interesting. And you kind of, like, no one ever told me that underground mushroom biomes had a bunch of traps in them, right? I just kind of learned that over time by constantly dying to traps in the underground mushroom biome, right? Trying to get like the loot and the mushrooms. Same as before with the surface mushroom biome. I wish there was more that went on here. The most relevant thing in the underground mushroom biome is grabbing a worm to do something somewhere else. I would love to see more in mushroom biome like activities and identity and stuff like that, because it's a huge opportunity right now, right? It's already got a lot going for it. It just needs a little bit more, right? So to me, it's like right there, top of C tier. It has nothing really wrong with it. I don't have much bad to say about the underground mushroom biome, but it needs that extra like push to be a really cohesive biome. So these are the ocean biome and their alts. I tried to be kind of cute with the like representation of them. This obviously is the Purity Ocean. Purity Ocean, I'm pretty alright with. It's not consequential like in any way. There's not much going on. There's the water chest that you can snag, which is a nice little boost if you decide to run there towards the start of the game. There's sharks for shark fins, which, you know, mega shark and junk like that. It's nice to have. There are the really powerful fishing items you can get. You can snag a reaver shark at the start of the game, which is interesting because it kind of opens up a more branching path in pre-hard mode. It kind of mixes the bag a bit. The angler spawns there, so for people who are really invested in fishing, it's pretty much essential. You can farm the treasure maps, and there's a unique type of wood out in the ocean. So it definitely has a decent chunk of things. I think the biggest missing link to the ocean right now is that it just isn't, there's not much there. The ocean is basically just, here's some sand, here's a couple palm trees, and a bunch of water, right? It would be nice if there was like a sunken ship that would spawn sometimes, or like freaking just put some sand castles down, right? Right now, the ocean doesn't really have much identity to it. It's just kind of there. It definitely has stuff, but it could use more. There could definitely be more going on in the ocean itself. So this next one is the corrupt ocean. This was my best attempt at representing it. Wasn't a great idea, but it kind of gets there. The corrupt ocean lets you get corruption crates, and like, that's pretty much it. So it's not really a thing that matters very much, but it sure is a thing, which is pretty cool. This is supposed to be the Crimson Ocean. Get it? Because it looks like ichor. It's actually honey, but pretend it's ichor for me, for my sake, because it would work that way. But it's kind of like the corruption, but I like it a little bit better. It doesn't have much going on uniquely for it, but it does slightly change, and it gives you a different crate you can get. So that's pretty cool. And then the Hallow does the same thing. You can get a different crate. Could get the different fishing drops. You know, it's pretty cool. It's all right. It's an option. You could do that. Why would you though? I guess we could bump up Hollowed Ocean because of the Crystal Serpent. I know people freak out about it for some reason. I still think Crystal Serpent is wicked overrated, but I'll put it higher for the general opinion. So, the surface purity biome, or the forest biome, is a little bit of a mixed bag. It is kind of like an icon for the game. It literally is the icon for the game, the tree from that biome. Super recognizable, and it has a ton of identity despite being the default biome, right? Like when you're jumping in, there's a lot of things that you learn and experience in that biome that kind of get you ready for what Terraria is going to be. And so it's quite unique in that perspective, but when you dig into what the surface forest biome has to offer, it's very little. Like you can get the living wood trees, you can get some like surface chests, and sometimes you can spawn king slime. But beyond that, there's not much really to be said about the biome. I think that it belongs in B tier just due to its identity and how iconic it is. That pushes it up a ton. I do think there could be more depth to the biome itself because there isn't much going on as of right now, but you know, it's got bunnies, so you can't really complain too much. I also just would like to interject and say how funny it is that you can like kind of see the sprite quality of Terraria progression over time with like dirt and mud being just like pillow shading and like just dots in it. And then you get to like the desert variants and it's like, oh, well, now there's texture. Wow, who would have thought? Okay, so this is the corrupt purity, which it might be a little bit weird, but I'm counting the pitfalls that exist in the corruption biome because those are still technically the surface. They don't usually dip into the underground, and they aren't a feature of the underground corruption. Underground corruption is kind of its own beast. So for the purposes of the ranking, we're going to consider those little dips under the surface to be part of the surface, even though it's technically under some ground, right? It has the best pet in the game, but it's really a boss. We're gonna try not to have that bias me too much. Corruption generally. When people tell me which is better, corruption or crimson, I tend to bring up this as my perspective. Crimson has better items and like crimson is stronger, right? If you want to have a game where you're stronger and take more from the evil biome, crimson's your jam. But corruption, to me, has the identity that crimson does not have. Corruption feels a lot more like the evil biome of Terraria to me if I had to pick one or the other. The enemies in the corruption are all a lot more significant and interesting to me. They stick in my mind a lot more than the other ones do, to the point that the crimson biome basically just copied the Eater of Souls because they didn't really have any idea of how to replace it, right? So when it comes to comparing the two, as a biome, if we're rating it as a biome and specifically a biome, I think the corruption kind of shines through overall as an experience. The way that the corruption sort of challenges you and the way it sort of introduces you to its enemies and the enemies that it has, I feel is more cohesive and Terraria, and just it works better for me than the Crimson does. Crimson has a lot of things going for it because it capitalizes on some mistakes that the corruption made, like the way to enter the little mini area in the Crimson biome is much nicer than the pitfalls of the corruption. But I think with the enemies and just the general identity and just the experience as a whole, going through the corruption for me generally is a lot more enjoyable and I think more impactful than the Crimson tends to be. Which is not to say that either of them are bad. I think both of the evil biome experiences are some of the best experiences that Terraria has to offer. But I think the corruption just skews a bit better for me as a whole from the perspective of a biome, right? We're not worrying too much about the gear. It's certainly a point of consideration, but the biome itself to me is a lot more impactful. So given that information, moving on to the surface Crimson, still a really, really solid biome. I think it's a lot more gameplay oriented this time around when they made this biome. Like I mentioned, the experience for going to the sort of underground Crimson area, quote unquote, is a lot more sort of gameplay friendly, and the enemies in the Crimson play around that with like the spiders on the walls in the background and junk like that, which certainly is nice, and I can appreciate that. And for that, I think it also beats out the underground desert for me, but it doesn't quite beat the corruption for all the reasons I mentioned before. I just think the experience is a bit better for one versus the other. Crimson still has a ton going for it, and especially if you are very gear oriented, you'll love the Crimson because there's so many really strong items that you can get there. Vampire knives exist, right? Like if you want to just destroy Terraria, get some vampire knives. They're great. They're a blast. You don't die. It just doesn't happen. So yeah, given the two big evil biomes and their purity factors, and by purity I mean surface, that's how I feel about it. Now the surface hollow biome. The surface hollow biome is a little bit of a something or other. But I'm gonna throw in a little bit of my bias here and do something that I'm assuming a lot of people are probably going to disagree with, and put it up there. I think Hallow is where Relogic shined in creating a biome that stands out from all the rest. Relogic is too tame with their biomes. They are too tame. I want the jungle to be even wackier than it currently is. I want the ocean to have, like, not just sharks, but sharks that are just leaping out of the water to try and kill me on the desert beaches, right? I want to have a mushroom biome where, like, the trees have a chance to come to life and beat the crap out of me, right? I want to see Terraria embrace its wacky nature, but it doesn't really do that with its biomes when you really think about it. Think about all the biomes and how they operate. Most of the time, if they get wacky, it's under some preset circumstance that isn't always the case. But in the Hallow, it's always wacky. The Hallow is always going crazy with you. The first time you see a unicorn in the Hallow biome, you like get this bright, beautiful smile on your face, only for it to turn into like tears and bloodshed when that same unicorn murders you on the spot because you thought you had a new friend, but no. The Hallow is such a great example of how you can take what Terraria is and stretch it to its limits. There's a lot of good stuff that you can get in the Hallow biome on the surface. You can get Daedalus Stormbow if you farm souls. I guess that's technically more of an underground Hallow thing, so maybe not that, but you get the unicorn horns and the pixie dust for holy arrows. You can farm the biome key for the rainbow gun. You can get unicorn on a freaking stick. One of the best items in the game. Don't even try and at me about that one. I really like what the Hallow is. It doesn't necessarily have too much depth going on in the surface, but wow. Please make more biomes like the Hallow. Please make the other biomes more like the Hallow. I want to see stupid, wacky garbage happening in the majority of the biomes in this game. And sometimes it happens, but it doesn't happen enough. Not nearly enough. Okay, so next up we have the underground purity. Just the regular, plain Jane underground, but like not with any specific biome. So basically, I want to put this biome here, basic is what I'm feeling like, but I feel like the real place is here. That's kind of what's going on in my head right now, is that I want to put this biome here because it has a very unique experience to it where you start out in the game, you go underground, you find new gear, you mine ores, you start dealing with like bats and skeletons and a bunch of different types of enemies. But I'm really thinking about that from like a pre-hard mode perspective. This biome doesn't change enough is I think the problem that I have. Instead of this biome changing a lot over the course of the game, it kind of is expected for you to change it by turning it into other biomes or going to variants of it. Which, yeah, fair enough, but I do think there should be more going on here. Like, you get Magic Quiver and Mimics and stuff like that, and you get the hard mode ores, but I hate the hard mode ores. I think they're awful. So as much as I feel the experience for this biome starting out is here, I think the ultimate experience for this biome is right around here. I think the underground has a very unique experience that starts out and then it just gets less and less engaging over time until eventually you're probably just not even there anymore. You forget that that even matters. You have a elevator to skip the entire thing. The underground corruption is, I think, a little bit weak. I think it kind of got caught up in like what made the original corruption good, and it didn't quite make itself good to expand upon that. You kind of just get the Eater of Worlds, but bigger. And you get like cursed flames and stuff like that, and none of those are necessarily bad, but they're not quite super unique. It has a great foundation with the like the beginning corruption, right? I would have liked to see them kind of expand upon the stuff more. Like really, I'm going through my list of enemies, and there's like the cursed clinger dude, there's the slightly larger Eater of Souls, and then there's the slightly larger worm, right? I don't know, it doesn't feel unique. It doesn't feel like it's changed much. It feels like it just happened again, but more. So, I don't know. Not a huge thing for me. I think the Underground Corruption kind of falls flat a bit. I think Underground Crimson nails the, like, sort of progression a lot more, personally. I really feel like Underground Crimson stands alone from the Surface Crimson way more than the Underground Corruption does to its Surface Corruption. Underground Crimson, I think, really nails it. I think Underground Crimson probably here. When I think of the Crimson, it's pretty interesting, because when I think of the Crimson, I don't think of the Surface Crimson. I actually think of the Underground Crimson the vast majority of the time. Where the Corruption failed to expand upon its underground area, the Crimson really succeeded. There was sort of a foundation of an identity there, and then the Underground Crimson was like, okay, what do we do with that? Like, we have Ichor now. Ichor is iconic. It's a huge thing, super powerful, really impactful throughout the game, and to the point that when I get Ichored, I'm mortified because I know how good Ichor is, and now it's happening to me? No, stop. Please don't do this. The Crimson Mimic has some interesting drops. Fetid Bagnacks, or however you say them, or people freak out about that dang item. It's absurd how much people like that item. There's a ton that goes into the Underground Crimson that makes it way more cohesive and interesting of an experience. It really expands upon what the original Crimson was. I really feel that there's a lot more soul in that biome than in the original one, and I'm a big fan. I would like to see more Crimson Underground style stuff implemented into the Corruption, where there's just more, like, it feels more threatening, it feels more, feels like it has more weight to it. So, Hallow Underground is a little bit of a weird spot for me. I have a lot of emotions regarding the Underground Hallow, because I think it has a lot of strengths, but I definitely know it has some weaknesses. The Underground Hallow, if you had to sort all these biomes by the items that they contain within them, the Underground Hallow is at the top of the list by such an enormous landslide, because it has these items that just destroy the game, right? There's the stupid Stormbow, there's Rod of Discord, there's like Blessed Apple, there's a bunch of things that if you just exist in the Underground Hallow for enough time, you will become a god. I don't love the experience of the Underground Hallow. I don't love the identity of the Underground Hallow, because I think the Underground Hallow forgot what was really special about the Above Ground Hallow, which is that it kind of was wacky and it took things further than you would expect them to, right? Underground Hallow is pink elemental things that already existed in the game, right? Like the guy that drops the Rod of Discord, I forget its name, is a player like copy, right? Which is interesting. But then there's like a bat and a slime and a sword that comes at you, which I do like the elemental sword, but that's not unique to the biome. Yeah, Chaos Elemental. Chaos Elemental is unique, but the rest are just pink versions of enemies you've seen already. It's sad to me because the Surface Hallow has so much identity crammed into it and is so unique, and like so much stupid stuff is happening on the Surface Hallow. And then you go underground and it's like, look, there's pink glowing enemies. They're extremely healthy and deal a ton of damage. So I'm a little bit sad about the Underground Hallow. It has so much power packed into it. It's got really good items packed into it. There's a lot to look for in the Underground Hallow, and I do think like the biome itself is visually interesting. The crystals and everything are pretty nifty and cool, but like it just falls so short on the enemy side of things. I just get so bored looking at the enemies in the Underground Hallow. They're pink, right? Wow, that's pretty cool. So I want to put this up here, but I'm going to put it here instead. I just feel like they dropped the ball really hard, where they forgot what the Hallow was, and they kind of turned it into something just much less interesting and much less unique. I would love to put it higher, but I just can't justify it. I feel like it lost a lot of what it was. Okay. The sky biome, which is not really a biome necessarily, but it felt weird to not count it because space is considered a biome, but sky isn't, and I really think it should be. So I kind of just threw this one in for my sake. And I really want to like the sky biome, but you really just have one thing, and that's floating islands, plus some enemies. There's a lot of opportunity, also floating lakes, you know, who cares? You have a lot of opportunity with the sky biome. There's like a lot of things that you could do up in the air of Terraria, and there's this huge space that's just open and waiting to be capitalized upon, but it's just empty, and it has some islands that are in the air, which I guess you could say is like they need to be rare, so there needs to be a bunch of empty space to kind of, you know, make that a thing. But I just feel like there's more you could do. There's so much space in the air of Terraria. I feel like there could be a lot more that is implemented into the sky. It's a great opportunity. I don't think it's being capitalized upon properly right now, though. So I think it goes there. Kind of like the glowing mushroom thing. I think there's a huge open space here that isn't really being capitalized on. The snow biome. The snow biome. All right. So this biome has some things in it. Some things in it. The water is a problem. We've already talked about that. You can get frostburn arrows. We already talked about that. It's got the best wood in the game, at least in my opinion, which is cool. You can get the Amrock, which is cool. And you can farm for the snow key, which is eh. There's stuff to do here, but not stuff that really matters super much. And it has Ice Golem, which everyone knows is great. It's really cool. It's very epic that Ice Golem is in this biome. I think that's such a great thing for it. It's really up there. You can get the items that it might just hit you anyway. And when it does hit you, you're killed for 2 minutes. But you know what I hate even more than Ice Golem? You know what I hate even more than the freaking Ice Golem? Why? Lord above, why is there not a corrupt, crimson, and hollowed variant to snow? What was the reason? Why didn't that get added to the game? Who did they forget? What is the point? I so frequently don't get to have a surface hollow biome because it generates in the snow. I don't understand why we got variants of ice but not snow. It's insane. I get like a half surface hollow biome because there was enough ice on screen incidentally. Why? It's such a problem, and it could be so easily solved that I think even a modder could do it in like, what, a day? You don't even need to change the texture that much. You can tell because these ones are just color shifts. Just do that to snow. Please. The fact that there is no alts to the snow biome is, I'll never understand it. It just feels lazy. I don't understand it. It frustrates me so much. This biome does not have enough going on, and because of that problem, I can't put it anywhere but D tier. Seriously. Like, it has some stuff that you can get in it that's decent. It's locked behind the worst enemy in the game, granted, but it is there. But just give me the snow variants. That's it. That's all. This could be a great biome if you did that. But no. No, you don't have to do that. It's fine. Don't bother. it's probably not too big of a deal. It's only like your game has a huge biome changing mechanic that like is super essential to the whole experience. It's fine. Just normal stuff. Just get some ice. Just grab ice. It's fine. You're right. Oh, no wonder they can't recolor it because they already did that with sand, which is the same. Oh my god. Old school problems coming to bite them today. Have you guys heard of a little biome called space? Because space exists. Space is going right here, and there's one reason for it. I want space to be right here. I want to put space right here so badly because it is such an opportunity. Space is a huge, enormous, gigantic, just tremendous opportunity, okay? The gravity's jank. It's at the very top of the world. You have to put in a decent amount of effort to even get to space in the first place, right? Like, space is so different from anything else in the game. And guess what? There's nothing. You get an achievement for going to space. That's it. Good job. Proud of you. You can also farm Martian probes in space. And that's it. I just... It's one of those things that really bugs me about Terraria, is that there's a lot of things in it that just feel like they were put in and then never given any thought. Space was probably just put in because they were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you went high enough that it changed to space? But then they never did anything with it, and it's frustrating because it feels like we're being teased, right? Like, here's this cool thing that happens when you go up high enough, and then you try and explore the entirety of space and there's nothing there, right? I would love to see space turn into something with content. I would love to see space be something that I actively want to go for during my playthroughs. I would love to hit hard mode and be like, all right, let's go in space. You know, let's just go in space. Make it a thing. Please. Please make it a thing. It could be so good. So the spider biome has cobwebs and spiders and a few unique mechanics to it. I will say that the spider biome, like, they did not make the mistake of making the spiders like fodder, right? The spiders hurt. Spiders are kind of scary in Terraria because they actually can just destroy you, right? That was a wise choice on their part. I'll put spider biome up here probably. It feels similar to the ocean for me, where it has this purpose it serves. Not much beyond that. It doesn't do a bad job necessarily, but there's not too much depth to what it does. You jump in, you beat up some dang spiders, you get some dang webs, maybe you get a girl who could give you a haircut, and that's it, right? I think it does a decent job of what it aims to be, but beyond that, not much more. Also, for some reason, if you're a summoner, this is where you go. I feel like that just kind of happened because they needed some place for summoners to go, and this place is there, so do it. So, if the dungeon is Terraria structures done right, then the temple is Terraria structures done wrong. There's 2 enemies that spawn in the temple that don't drop very many things except like a couple of rare drops. There's traps in the temple that you can just disarm before you do anything that might get you hurt. And there's some good stuff in it, but you're really just gonna go there and then kill Golem and then leave. But sometimes you can't even kill Golem because you could have a temple layout that literally blocks off the Golem room or shoves Golem into a wall. Sometimes you don't even need the temple key. You could just walk in because it generates wrong. The temple was a chance to be a new experience, but instead it's just a speed bump. And that's a huge waste of an opportunity. A huge waste of an opportunity. Okay. And our final biome of the day, of the tier list, is the Underworld. And I am a pretty big fan of the Underworld, honestly. The Underworld has a lot of identity to it, and it's very recognizable what the Underworld is and what it achieves, right? Most of the enemies in the Underworld are pretty unique and special, and they all stand out super well amongst the crowd. If you had to pick them out, you absolutely could. There's Bone Serpent. I love Bone Serpent. I'm biased. Okay. I'm not gonna say that the wall of flesh makes the place good, but I will say that the place kind of sort of works with the wall of flesh, sort of, but also works against it a little bit, but works with it a little bit too. It's a weird sort of half and half situation. There's the Shadow Chest loot, which you can go for. There's Hellstone, which is a very unique ore. I kind of don't like Hellstone, but I also think it's good that there's different like approaches to getting ore, so I will say that it's a plus side, even though I don't like it. There's some good potions from pots, and there's Hellfire arrows. The one biggest problem that the Underworld has is that you go there, you kill the wall of flesh, and then you never come back. You could get the stupid scythe from the Red Devils, which is one of the worst items in the game. Like, you just there's no reason to go to the Underworld after you kill the wall of flesh, and that is a waste. That's really sad. I would love to come back at some point and see how it's changed as a result of my actions in that biome. So yeah, it's disappointing to me that this kind of has a similar situation with the Purity Underground, where it's just like, it just doesn't matter after a certain point. I'm going to put this, I think, at the bottom of A tier, because I still think the experience it has makes it a really, really valuable biome. I think it's very, very cohesive and well designed and has impact and has identity, but it just doesn't have much to provide after you've gone through it once. You go in, you go out, that's it. Yeah, I think if there's one thing to take away from this list, it's that the alt biomes need to matter more. The alt biomes really are just like, you get the default enemies and then like one extra thing in each biome. And I don't think that's good enough. I think we should set the bar higher if it's gonna be such a core mechanic of the game. I should get multiple special little bonuses for going into a corrupt desert, right? I should get a bunch of things for going to the corrupt ice biome. If I make a corrupt ocean, I want the water to kill me. I don't know, do something wacky, right? There's so much opportunity for these alt biome mechanics that aren't really being capitalized upon right now. And I think that's a shame. So I would love to see some of this in the upcoming update. We'll see if it actually happens. I find it unlikely, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe I'm a prophet. But yeah, there we go. The biomes tier list completed. Top to bottom, all of the dang biomes. If you're not sure what some of them are because you skipped to the ending, I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. Look at the timestamps. They'll probably, you can figure it out maybe. So yeah, I don't have any plans to do any tier lists at this exact moment for at least a little bit. But we might see updated tier lists in the future. I'm not sure. I don't know. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get any expectations. It's a possibility, but not a certainty. So, yeah.